Oh, right, guys. Today we are going to be reacting to how anyone, including you, can read German. Okay, let's see what this is all about. Let's jump in, guys.
Including this is mainly going to lie in swapping letters in and out to
Swapping
make these words look more like English. I go into exactly why it's possible and what it's got to do with all of these guys later, but the key point is that English and German are part of the same language family. They share a common ancestor that they both developed from, and by retracing that development, you can find consistencies in how they differ. So for example, where English developed a th sound in certain words, German went off in a slightly different direction and ended up with a d sound instead. So where English has 3, German has drei. Where English has thunder, German has Donner. English thing is German ding, and where English has the, German has seemingly endless numbers of words of various genders and cases, all of which basically mean the and begin with D. And while we're here, actually, German has du and dein, which are 2 words that have the same ancestry as the age-old English words thou and thine. So there's our first trick. Swapping the D in a German word for TH can very often get you closer to the English equivalent. Now, linguistically speaking, the D sound is very similar to the T sound. The processes in our mouths to produce these sounds are extremely similar. Just a tiny tweak makes a T a D. And that's why you can also often swap a German T sound with TH as well, particularly in the middle or at the end of words like Mutter, which is mother, and Wert, which is worth. This similarity between T and D sounds also opens up another letter swap opportunity, this time between the 2 languages. German T's can often be swapped for English D's. Take a look at these pairs. Dream, daughter, and dear all have German equivalents beginning with T. Tier is actually the German word for animal, but that is precisely what deer originally meant in English before we decided to make it mean one animal in particular. In fact, the Dutch word for animal is still deer. Dutch very often provides a satisfying midpoint between German and English, a bit like it does geographically, I suppose. Now back to German, the D-swap works elsewhere in some words too. Check out under
It was funny, I guess.
and leader becoming unter and leiter. Incidentally, leiter also means ladder. It's all D's and T's again. Now while we're throwing T's around, that reminds me of another good swap. This time, instead of taking the T's out, we're going to slip them in the place of the S sound made by either 1 or 2 S's. Check out how neatly German Wasser becomes English water. The German word for what is was, and if you apply 2 of our tricks to German das, you get its English equivalent, that. And that, incidentally, in Old English, like das does in German, was the neuter version of the. So it works then as well. And another bonus fact, there are actually some German dialects that use that and dat with a T at the end instead of an S, as does our friend from the Low Countries, Dutch. Ooh,
Now, the thing is, how, let me just put it this way. How close is the Dutch language to German? How close or similar are they? I always thought they were very similar. But I might be wrong here. I might be wrong.
and let's bring in that most Germanic of characters, this fat, wiggly fellow, the SZ.
like a Z,
Although
yeah.
its name literally means SZ or SZ, it actually replaces a double S.
Yep.
So if you see it,
Like was.
sub in a double S, then try swapping it with a T. For example, German Fuss becomes English foot, with a bit of imagination
Fuss.
applied to the vowels. Now let's fling some more T's around, because adding a T can also help us solve all of these words. By subbing it in for the ts sound, usually expressed in German with a Z, we can get much closer to the English to two, this time the number, and tongue. And there are plenty of others. Right, more of these to come, but I realise it's a lot to take in with all of these consonants flying around. I've become somewhat consonant incontinent, haven't I? So let's take a break to understand why these tricks work when they do, which I admit is not 100% of the time, but the hit rate is really good. We'll get to the cool reason just as soon as I've introduced you to this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace empowers individuals.
I know he has to make money, but I'm sorry, I have to move forward.
So earlier I said our translation tricks had something to do with all of these guys. Well, what did I mean? Well, what do Rapunzel, Hansel and Gretel, Little Red Riding Hood and others have in common? The answer is that they're all fairy tales featured in the collections of Germany's famous Brothers Grimm, Wilhelm and Jakob. By the way, brother is another word that our tricks work on, because you can just swap the D in the middle of Bruder in German for a TH and you basically get brother. Anyway, Jakob here is our hero because as well as working with seinem Bruder to bring together and reimagine European fairy tales, he was also a prolific linguist. So I mentioned earlier how English and German are from the same language family, the Germanic languages. In fact,
and I think that's why the guy with the mustache, right? The bad guy with the mustache, he was trying to convince actually the British to be aligned with Germany back then, because he said that the British, they have a common ancestry. So,
Western Germanic languages. And Jakob Grimm was one of the driving forces behind an ingenious theory about how Germanic languages developed together, known as Grimm's Law. Long, long ago, probably in the first millennium BC, the Germanic languages went through a consonant shift that moved their consonant sounds away from those of Proto-Indo-European. That's the ancient ancestor Germanic languages share with other language families like the Romance languages, the Celtic languages, Slavic languages, and others like Sanskrit, for example. But the language that became modern High German, which is the most widely spoken form of German and the one we're talking about, went through an extra consonant shift that other Germanic languages, like English, did not. That left German with different consonant sounds to English, but those differences are remarkably consistent. And that's why we can often swap them in and out and get from one language to the other. So now you know the theory, let's get on to some more tricks. Another way that English and German diverged from one another is with the sounds p and f. And it means that a lot of f sounds in German written with an F, a double F or PF,
a V.
F, can be
V too, right? The V, f. The V, f.
swapped with a P to get you closer to the English. For example, German Pfeffer is English pepper. Pfeifer is pipe. They're both double whammies. But German auf has the same linguistic root as English up, and German Hoffe is English hope. There are so many of these as well. Schiff and ship, Apfel and apple. This one really does work. So remember, when the English P, the German's F. Now the next swap is a piece of cake, or in German,
I guess that was funny. Ein
Stück Kuchen. You can often sub this CH in a German word for a K and get closer to the English, like Kuchen and cake. Also German Machen.
That one's kind of far away. Yeah, that one's
is English make, although it also means do as well.
Yeah.
Suchen is related to English seek, and a German Buch is an English book. And again, actually, once you do these swaps, you basically get to the Dutch version of these words. Check out Machen. So Dutch viewers, do feel free to use these cheats with your own language too. German Ich becomes Dutch Ich, both of which mean I, and incidentally,
it's very similar, right? Am I wrong here? It's very similar. For some reason, Ich, which is I, is kind of far away unless you want to eliminate CH, right?
Old English for I, as in me, was ich, or something like it. My pronunciation of Old English is always dreadful. Anyway, that's all a Dutch distraction because I was just going to point out that German words that begin with a K often have an English equivalent beginning with C. Cake is a good example of that
Kuchen.
one as well. A German Kuh is a cow, Kreuz is a cross, and lots of others are really obvious, like Kultur and culture. You're unlikely to
KC.
struggle with ones like that. Now, any more for any more? Yes. Hanging out at the end of the alphabet are W and Y, and they hold the key to another couple of handy switcheroos you can do. We're going to try swapping them in for German G's. Let's take the German word Tag. So we already know what to do with the T. We're swapping it for a D, aren't we? Remember dream and daughter? And now let's try, as I just suggested, removing the G and putting in a Y. We end up with day. What's the German for day? It's Tag. Another fascinating historical fact, the Old English word for day was this. Notice anything? It has a G at the end, although it was actually pronounced more like a Y. It was something like die. Again, my Old English is dreadful. Anyway, some more G and Y swaps. German
English,
Weg
yeah,
is English way.
English is kind of, it's a difficult language for this because when you see it, you don't pronounce it like you see it. English is one of these weird, very weird languages that you need to speak it, quite often, like for a long period of time to just make sure you can understand. Like, for example, in Spanish, even though, let's say if you learn Spanish, but you know the structures of Spanish, you have to read it, it's very straightforward. There's not a lot of weird pronunciation to it. And the same with German. You see it, you pronounce it how you see it. In the case of English, it's just up and down, sideways, man. Like it's very difficult.
A. German sagen is English say, and if the Y doesn't work, just give a W a go. German bogen is English bow. Oh, and I've just thought of another good one, actually. A lot of B's in German are V's in English.
Yep.
Take a look at the German words for
Leben.
live, and indeed for liver. Also to give, which is geben, and to stick things together is kleben, which is a relative of English cleave. Cleave is a fascinating word because it can both mean to separate and to put together. Have you ever noticed that? Little doggy. Had enough of these yet? Well, don't make me stop before I get to my triple letter score trick with CHT. German words containing CHT often have a similar English word with GHT instead. I give you light, both in the sense of the shiny stuff
Licht.
and the
Light.
stuff that's easy to
So how do you
lift.
pronounce it? Light?
I also
Light, licht, leicht. Right? So light, licht, and leicht.
to give you night, eight, and sight. And there are others. Ones to watch out for, though. Nicht means not rather than night, and you wouldn't be blamed for thinking a knecht was a knight, but it isn't. A knecht is a servant, but in my defence, the words are related. The English knights saw themselves as servants to their
Good point.
sovereign. Right, or should that be Richt? Actually, a German judge is a Richter, and they oversee the administration of Recht, so I think that one sort of counts. Anyway, right. Those are all the tools you need to be a consonant trickster. So let's put them to the test and bring back this from earlier. And if you hadn't already worked out what this is, it does tell you at the top. Tagesmenü.
Tagesmenü. Schemmich, Karotexensuppe und Brot, Kalbsschnitzel mit. Oh man, this one, what was it? Pfeffer sauce. Yeah, that one's a little hard. Apfelkuchen, Kaffee oder Wasser.
Let's work our magic on the T and swap it for a D, and the G for a Y, and we get something very close to day's menu. This is a menu of the day's specials. So, what's for starters? Cremige Karottensuppe. Well, already we see that we can do another G and Y swap in the first word, and we get much closer to the English word creamy. And then we can swap the K at the start of the next word with a C, although I suspect you'd already worked that one out. This is creamy carrot soup. Und is just German for and
yeah.
if you need any help with the last word, swap the T at the end for a D, and you can work out that that's bread. The next word is a bit tricky. You probably already know what a schnitzel is, a delicious breaded cutlet. But what about the start of the word, though? Well, swap the K with a C and the B with a V, and you get calves. Does that look like any English word to you? How about calves? Kalb is the German for veal, the meat of a young cow. A calf. Mit is just the German for with, and we came across Pfeffer earlier. It's our double whammy P swap, giving us pepper. And sauce is conveniently the English spelling. There is a German word for sauce that is extremely similar, but the English, or rather French spelling, is also used. On to our dessert. It's apple cake. The PF again swapped for a P gives us an apple, then swapping the K for a C and the CH for a K gets us close enough to cake to work it out, like we did earlier on. And then finally to the drink, you actually have a choice of coffee or water. If we swap the K for a C and that double S for a T, although I'm sure the waiter will let you have both if you ask nicely enough. So that's the full menu. And
when he put it in practice, it made a lot of sense.
There we have it.
That was actually very helpful. That was very helpful, and most importantly, very educational. Very educational. Wow. Those tricks helps to connect some of the neurons that you are missing when you're learning a language, and it makes it easy to make sure you travel. Oh my, what happened here? That the information is traveling faster because you're fixing some of those, areas in your brain. They're not connecting some of the ideas. Little shortcuts, man. That's very good. That's very good. Yeah, guys, I want you guys to answer my question. How close is Dutch to German? I would love to hear you guys' opinion. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you in the next one.